But I think one of the things, this is one of the things that I've come across as kind of a barrier or a confusion is how does one approach such a huge field? Like, how do you choose who to read and where to start? Because there's just so many philosophers and there's so many different lines of thought.
Yeah. Well, you drew a nice distinction between a field, which consists of thinkers, positions, views, theories, and so forth, and a kind of, shall we say, existential energy. So we'll start with the latter because I want to make sure that we have the right motivating force. That is, it really wouldn't be that helpful to come to what I would call philosophia, the love of wisdom or loving pursuit of the wise life, if there actually isn't that existential aliveness. Something in you is yearning to answer something very fundamental. If that's not there, it's okay, but you might not want to. You should read something else. And that's so something I would say instead. Like, if you're not yet into this, it's okay. Do something else. And that's not cheeky. It's not mean spirited. It's just you enter the door when you're ready, right? When the fruit is ripe, as it were. So once you start to feel, however vague and fuzzy and meandering this longing may be, then you may wish to engage with some of these thinkers. I say may because it's also important to begin to understand that philosophizing, doing philosophy, as it were, doesn't fundamentally require engaging with Locke, Hume, Plato, Socrates, and so forth. It's not necessary, but it is extraordinarily helpful. I'll get to that in a moment. So the second thing you'd want to do is begin to take these questions very seriously. And you want to learn, I think, what I would call the art of philosophical inquiry, which is an art, not a method. But you begin to learn how to ask questions and how to supply answers, be it on your own in a dialogical manner, that is an internal dialogue, so to say, or with others. Right? Either way, you're beginning to learn this art about how the questions get clarified, and as a consequence, they come to, let's say, the heart of the matter or the truth of the matter. And we can discuss that. So let's suppose that you've come alive to philosophy. Let's suppose that you have at least some inkling of how to ask questions and supply answers. Then you may need some friends, some mentors. And I think that's the way I would understand the Western philosophical tradition. If you don't do that, then you think these are impenetrable, threatening, abstruse thinkers. Like, you come to a Hegelian text, you think, I have no idea what this means. I have no idea how to begin. So then I would say, once you have a question or two, you can begin to turn to some of these friends and find your entry point. If your question is something to do with what is how does one know anything, then you would be more apt to turn to Immanuel Kant than you would to an ethicist. If your question is, how shall I lead a good life, then you may be more apt to begin with to turn to Plato or Aristotle or the Stoics, because these questions were paramount for them. Not only these questions, but they're questions that are obviously taken up there. So that's the next part. You're learning that your questions are alive, you're taking them seriously, and you're going, just as you would go to a spiritual teacher, in order to help you clarify and understand, to make sense of, to make headway with these fundamental concerns. And then I would suggest, and it would take a while to get into it, but at time you develop a kind of facility with the language, just as you develop a facility with the language of playing music. So there is what educational theorists like E.D. Hirsch would call background knowledge. You develop a sufficiently robust conceptual repertoire to know what qualia means, to know what primary and secondary quality is referred to know what Cartesian substance dualism signifies and so forth. I'm not going to go through all those terms, but you begin to have a sufficiently robust conceptual set so that you can begin to see that this is exactly what this person is talking about. And lastly, well, it was lastly for now, you get accustomed to the fact that philosophy in the Western tradition is a conversation. It's not as though Hobbes just invented Leviathan out of the blue. He was living in a certain cultural moment, a revolution. Society was in shambles. He begins to concoct what a strong state would look like. So he's in conversation with his time. He's also in conversation with the thinkers. So he becomes an early social contract theorist, and you can learn what that means. So you get a horizontal conversation whereby philosopher X is engaged with Y and Z and so on. And you start to know what they're talking about. And you also, I would argue, this is my own sense of the history of philosophy, you need to have something understanding of the historical and cultural moment to see what is the problem that's really getting their goat. Why was Hobbes writing about the strong state as opposed to the philosophy of music? So at some point you begin to find your way in and through your engagement with these various friends. And you get to, shall we say, to put it aesthetically, a kind of taste. There are certain philosophers, friends, who become go-to for you. Right? And that's why you start to get a sense of, oh, Nietzsche is a wonderful thinker and I can't stomach his politics, something like that. Or you find that you might even say, I tend to have Aristotelian leanings. Not because it's showy, I hope, or egotistical to say that, but because you're starting to get very clear about what your own coordinates are. You understand where you are on the map, as it were.